Croeso, Difta, Banachtin, Giahwich, Falcha, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to tell you about medieval knights, creatures that howl forlornly in the woods, sunken kingdoms, and great giants that fight and dance in the sky. I'm going to lead you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations: Wales, Cornwall, Isle of Man, Ireland, Scotland, and Brittany. Welcome. Hello everyone, welcome to the 19th episode of the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. We're almost at 20, not quite, almost. Impressive, I think you'll find. I had assumed that I would have given this up a long time ago. You might have noticed we've got a little bit of a new introduction there. If you find that you absolutely can't stand it, you hate it, then I do have the previous one saved, so I can always reinstate it. So do let me know if it was incredibly jarring and you don't like greetings and phrases and hellos to be updated, because that's what they are. I've updated it really with greetings in each 6 languages: in Cornish, in Welsh, in Manx, in Scots Gaelic, in Gaelic Irish, and obviously in Breton as well. And yeah, the order in which I said each of those nations is also the order of the language, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been over a month since I've uploaded an episode. I have wanted to upload one for quite a while, but it's always the case that I'll sit down to do it and then something happens that causes me not to do it, and then because one little thing happened one day I decide to push it back for another 3 weeks or what have you. But I also was going to do an episode very much focused on deaf omens in Breton folklore, because we are of course back to lovely Brittany. Those of you who have listened to the podcast for quite a while will know that I focus on each one of the 6 Celtic nations for each episode. I'm not going to do the deaf episode today. I think I'll do that when I next cover Brittany. I just felt like during a global pandemic, talking about deaf is probably not the most sensitive thing to do. I do think that as a society, I'm talking about as if, globally we're all in the same bloody society. But I do think that in the UK especially, we could talk about death more, and it would probably be a bit more healthy to talk about death a little bit more, because it's something that will happen to us all. Anyway, let's brush over that fact. Don't want to depress anyone or upset anyone, like I said. So instead of death, we're going to talk about demons. Ooh, so light-hearted instead. Very excited about this one. Now you might have noticed we've got a lovely crackling fire in the background. Ooh, doesn't that just sound lovely? Well, it is quite relevant to today's demon. It is Yan-gant-y-tan, who I did actually put out a little riddle on social media. I put up a few emojis. I think it was a moon and a demon face and a hand and a candle, and I asked you to try and figure out what the next episode would be about. And that is because Yan-gant-y-tan is a pretty strange looking dude, really. He's just got like this hand that's basically like this revolving torch, so hand and candle was the best that I could do. But yeah, I thought that the fire in the background would be a nice little touch as well. So, Yan-gant-y-tan, for a start, bloody love the name. Well done, Brittany, for such a great name there, and really does remind me again how closely linked Breton, Cornish and Welsh are as well. And of course, Cumbric, the old language of the Hen Ogledd, the former kingdom that was kind of the north of England. So the Hen Ogledd and the Cumbric language was very much closely related to Welsh, Cornish and Breton as well. And in fact, I believe that still in the north of England, some farmers still use the old Cumbric counting system. So that's Yan, Tan, Tether, Mether, Pip, Aza, Seza, Akakontadic, Yanadic, Tenadic, Tevradic, Mevradic, Bumfit, Yanabum, Tanabum, Tevrabum, Mevrabum, Jigit. So that's 1 to 20 in the old kind of Cumbric language. And there are some slight variations from region to region as well, of course. And I love that, but you can see the Yan-gant-y-tan to me instantly. I didn't think that it looked Breton. I thought that it looked sort of more Cornish or Cumbric or even Welsh. So that goes to show how closely related they all are. It's a little observation there. And plus, I really wanted to just say Yan Tan Tether Mother Pip Aza Seza Akakontadik Yanadic Tenadic Tevradic Mevradic Bumfit Yanadbum Tanabum Tevrabum Mevrabum Jigget. And there's of course the lovely song by Jake Thackeray, Molly Metcalf, and it's sort of a folk song about an old kind of shepherdess. I say old shepherdess, she's a young shepherdess who dies alone on her remote farm, and it's a very beautiful song and very kind of connecting to, you know, history and heritage. He had a lovely Yorkshire accent, Jake Thackeray, very lovely Yorkshire accent, and it just goes to show how diverse the UK is, from region to region, from town to town, from village to village. We have our own kind of customs and stories and dialects and accents and the way that we view the world. So I'm not the biggest fan of kind of lumping the whole of England together or lumping the whole of Britain together and kind of, I'm going to say it, whitewashing our history and making it so that we are sort of this one big blob of the same culture, you know, and especially don't like it when it's concerning the whole of Europe, as if Europe, we all have the same culture. To me, personally, that is the way that you eradicate and erase regional identities and cause real harm to culture and heritage. That is just me, so I won't rant too much on that subject, but I do think that it's important to celebrate our regional differences, and not in a terms of being like, oh, I'm better than you over there, but just to be like, oh, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a lovely bit of history? Isn't that a lovely bit of heritage? Oh, look, it's similar over here. Oh, look, it's different over here. I just think that that is a nice, healthy way to engage with your own history and heritage, and that's why I love folklore particularly. I think it's a way of connecting to history and heritage in a way that doesn't need to be harmful. So I am very cross when white supremacists use it as a tool to kind of eradicate and erase regional identities by kind of claiming, you know, unfairly and historically inaccurately that we are all this one big monolithic thing in Europe. Anyway, sorry, that was a big rant, and if I've offended anyone by that, then quite frankly I don't care, because the types of people that I would offend by that are perhaps not the types of people that I really want listening to my show in the first place. This is a show that is meant to be for everyone, if whether or not you have history or heritage related to any of the 6 Celtic nations, whether or not you live in any of the 6 Celtic nations. It doesn't matter if you do, and you do have history and heritage connected to it, and it does make you think of your grandparents or great grandparents or something like that, then I am very happy for you to listen to this show, and it brings me joy that I can bring you a small bit of joy and kind of, you know, familial connection there. But if you have no kind of connection whatsoever to the lands in which these stories come from, it doesn't matter. I'm glad that you're here anyway. If you're just a folklore mythology fan and you're interested in Celtic stuff because you don't know much about it, I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm glad that I can take you on the journey with me. So now that we've got that over and done with, we're getting back to Yan-gant-y-tan. What a great name, Yan Gantitan. It's just so much fun to say. You often find that with like demon names. Yan Gantitan, Mephistopheles. They have these very grand sounding names that are just really fun to speak. I'm hoping it isn't sort of like a Beetlejuice deal, and if you say their names 3 times, they just kind of like metamorphosize out of the air. That would be horrible. Please don't do that. I don't want that. I love Beetlejuice, you know, objectively, but I probably wouldn't really want him hanging around me that often. Thank you very much. So who is Yan Gantitan, you may ask? Well, listeners, glad that you're here, because that's literally what I'm here to tell you. Yan-gant-y-tan is a demon that resides in the very west of Brittany in a region called Finistère. So I think Finistère is kind of translated as end of the world. So it probably, I don't know because I'm not from Brittany, I'm not from France, so I don't know all of the kind of nuances and idiosyncrasies of living there and, you know, inside jokes and whatever. But it might have the same kind of symbolisms perhaps as West Penwith in Cornwall does, when it feels very ancient and rugged and like the end of the world. Not Land's End though, because that is now, you know, completely commercialised. You have to like pay to get there. I've never been to Land's End, actually, I don't think. No, I've never been to Land's End. I've been to the Minack Theatre when I was in school, but I've never been to the Land's End. It's just, you know, commercialising a bit of the Cornish landscape, but whatever, let's not talk about that. But anyway, so Yan Gantitan lives in a region of Brittany that is right on the edge of the world, the most westerly point of Brittany that you can get, of France that you can get. In fact, if you go any further, you drop into the ocean. So probably lots of other Breton folklore creatures to greet you once you reach the ocean, you know, Morvens and things like that. But Yan-gant-y-tan predominantly walks around the country region, so you can see him walking along country lanes and through farms and things like that, which does disturb me a little bit because I do like to walk around remote farms quite a bit. Luckily I'm not in Brittany, but who knows, as you're just about to find out, there are lots of comparable pieces of folklore and folk tales across other regions as well. But before we get into that, I better describe to you how Yan Gantitan looks. So he's sort of described as this quite kind of medieval stereotypical depiction of the wild man. So quite hairy, quite wiry and quite short, I suppose. But the only thing that really distinguishes him from everyone else, or from other wild men depictions, and Green Man as well. Green Man and wild men, they are quite closely linked really. But the one thing that sets him apart from them is the fact that he basically has a torch for a hand. So in one of his hands, well, his fingers are basically candles, and they revolve around very quickly to make this very bright torch in one hand. So he walks around the dark country lanes in Finistère in Brittany with this great big torch of a hand. So presumably in the dark, which is when he is wont to kind of haunt the landscape, you wouldn't necessarily see him very clearly, but you would see that torch, that bright light. Perhaps you would also see it illuminating his strange face and body as well. I'm not sure, but you're certainly going to see that vibrant torch. So when I mentioned he is quite similar to other folk tales and pieces of folklore, that's what I meant. So quite closely related to Will-o'-the-Wisp, which is orb-like being that floats around and is said to kind of disrupt the kind of cognitive abilities of travellers. You know, it confuses them, gets them lost, and, you know, usually in trouble. We've also got to the American listeners, my lovely American listeners. Most of you are American actually who listen to me, and I welcome you a lot. But jack-o'-lanterns, guys, jack-o'-lanterns actually are very much associated with, of course, Halloween. So jack-o'-lanterns, the name actually comes from the phenomenon of strange lights flickering over peat bogs, usually in Ireland, I'm guessing, and they're called will-o'-the-wisps or jack-o'-lanterns. And that name is also tied to the Irish legend of Stingy Jack and all sorts of things like that. So they're just these lights shining in the darkness that are quite sinister in a way. They're always kind of given these sinister connotations of making you lose your way and disorientating you. So it's quite mischievous as well. There's also, and I'm sure you'll be glad to know, a Cornish equivalent. Yes sir. There's a Cornish equivalent, Joan the Wad. Now, Joan the Wad was the queen of the Piskies. My goodness, take away my Cornish card, banish it into the sea, that's it, I'm done. No, Joan the Wad was the Queen of the Piskies, much the same as sort of Will-o'-the-Wisp or Jack-o'-lantern or whatever. It's something associated with a torch and with light, because Wad in Cornish is light, it means torch. So Joan, sort of like John of the Light, Joan the Wad. In fact, the translation of the name from Breton seems to be John of the Fire, or rather John with the Fire. So really similar to Joan the Wad, really, or Jack-o'-lantern or anything like that. They're really similar. So again, tracing similarities across regions. Awesome fun. Thank you very much for listening. And there is another translation for the name as well. Jacques Albin Simon Colin de Plancy was a French occultist who then became very interested in Roman Catholicism and things like that. But he wrote a book that I'm led to believe is very seminal in terms of studying demonology. It's not really my area of expertise, so I don't know a lot about demonology and things like that, but it is called the Dictionnaire Infernal, or the Infernal Dictionary, and it is basically just a dictionary of demons, and Yan-gant-y-tan features in that. So it was published in 1818, so 202 years ago, and I think when it was first published he was quite sceptical of sort of supernatural beings and things like that, but towards the end of his life he was very interested and a very devout Roman Catholic, so he converted to be very devout Roman Catholic, and so his interpretations of the demons became quite different. So I think there's been a lot of revisions and a lot of different versions of the Infernal Dictionary to show and reflect those different attitudes towards demons and theology, I suppose. But Yan Gantitan is featured in the Infernal Dictionary, or the Dictionnaire Infernal, and as the Wanderer in the night. So actually I think that's my favourite version of Yan Gantitan's kind of name, Wanderer in the night, other than Yan-gant-y-tan, which is obviously the best, but Wanderer in the Night really does describe him very well, though it doesn't really describe his sort of torch hand, so I suppose it's not better in some ways, but still quite spooky, isn't it, really? So we've described what Yan-gant-y-tan looks like, we've described his name and where you might be able to find him, but let's delve in a little bit deeper as well. So Yan-gant-y-tan is said to be quite a evil omen, really, a bad omen. He's not someone that you want to really come across on your quite romantic evening walks through the country. No, you do not want to see him. Because of the nature of his strange revolving candle hand, he can't turn very quickly. So if you do fancy visiting Brittany, or if you are from Brittany, walking around the country of Finisterre, just run in circles around him and you'll probably just get confused because he can't turn around. Now, with many folk tales that are quite similar, you can in fact persuade him to leave you alone through means of bribery. Lovely. You can leave a golden chain or something similar hanging around a goalpost outside your house, and he will leave your home for at least one day, which is actually quite expensive. I would think that the cheapest option would be to just, I don't know, like make friends with him or somehow defeat him in battle. Gold chain every night seems awfully excessive, doesn't it? And that would definitely rack up the bills. Imagine that if you had to factor in gold chains into your rent payments. So say for example your rent a month was like 500 euros or something. Oh, is that really cheap? I don't know. 500 euros. But then your gold chain, I don't know, allowance was 300, 400. I don't know how much gold chains cost. I don't wear jewellery. I'm like Lucille Bluth when she's like, how much is a banana? $12? But yeah, it's pretty expensive to keep up with that and doesn't seem at all sustainable to me. So most descriptions of him are quite sinister, quite mischievous, very much the same as Will-o'-the-Wisp, as I mentioned before, but also similar to Will-o'-the-Wisp and quite similar creatures that occupy the same role in various folk tales. He actually can be pleasant to strangers as well. Most of the time you probably don't want to meet him. Please don't go searching for him. But there are instances where he is given 5 candles to a walker outside in the dark, I'm assuming, to light their way home. That is quite similar to a lot of these stories about like Will-o'-the-Wisp or Joan the Wad or something like that. They can be quite capricious and mischievous and sinister, but also there are times when they actually will help people and they will come to someone's aid. I don't know what the kind of differences are, like what type of person you need to be to elicit either the bad reaction from them or the good reaction. I'm not sure on that. I'm always trying to be a good person. So one little thing that I do on my walks if I'm eating is I leave like a little bit of food next to a tree or something, is like, I don't know, thanks, in case piskies are around. I'm not saying I do believe them, I'm not saying that I don't, but I also say thank you to most trees that I walk past as well, just in case. You've got to be polite, guys. You've got to be polite and courteous, because in case some sort of strange pisky demon-like creature wants to lead me astray, he'll be like, oh, she's a polite one, she respects her surroundings, in fact, oh, she's also lost, so we'll help her, instead of, you know, leading her into danger. That's just what I'm constantly hoping anyway. That's my motto, is just be nice to all folkloric creatures, whether or not you believe them, because in case they are real, then they're on your side. There you go, bit of advice for you there. So, in terms of his strange kind of torch-like hand, some people have made the comparison or the reference to a hand of glory. Now, for those of you not aware, a hand of glory it was a bit grim really, it's like a pickled hand of specifically a man who has been hanged. And usually it's his left hand. Not sure why. In fact, I don't actually know which hand Yan-gant-y-tan's candle revolving wheel thing is supposed to be on, whether, you know, to make sure that it's even a legitimate comparison to compare the two. A hand of glory is quite interesting in terms of old beliefs surrounding it, that the hand of glory combined with a candle made from the fat of the corpse itself would stop anyone who it was presented to, you know, rendered them motionless. There are various 18th century kind of documents that describe this practice of the hand of glory and making the candle itself and then putting the candle in the hand. And to be fair, the hand of glory actually does have connotations to France in many ways as well. So various folklorists and etymologists and linguists or what have you have made the connection between, oh, there's the dog again outside, bloody hell. Every single time I go to sit down and record my podcast, some sort of strange noise happens. Earlier it was the ice cream man, now it's the dog. So even though no one in my house, I'm completely alone for the first time in months, I still have noises to contend with. But that's just me. Anyway, hand of glory. Outside of the hand of glory, hands in particular, and especially hands of dead men, do have prominence in folklore as sort of symbols of power and magic. And a particular etymologist, Walter Skeet, said that the phrase hand of glory is in fact a folk etymology, and it derives from the French mon de gleur. I'm sorry, that pronunciation is disgusting. Forgive me, French listeners. I know that I have a few of you. But either way, it's a corruption of mandrake. And then, of course, he makes the connection then that, and uses a quote from someone else, that the mandrake shineth by night altogether like a lamp. So again, there's that connection between this hand and the light, and it's very similar to Yan-gant-y-tan's strange hand that he has. So I don't know. I can't find any other sort of deeper connections to it than that. I'm sure that there are journals that people have written and what have you, but it's quite interesting to me then, because that sort of implies that the Yan-gant-y-tan is associated with death in a way, is a death omen, perhaps maybe even a representative of a dead man. I don't know, it's interesting to think about really, but there are those kind of small connections there. And it's interesting that it has those French connections as well. So as it turns out, I probably could have included Yan-gant-y-tan in the deaf folklore episode of Brittany, but to be fair, the Bretons have so much death in their folklore that the episode might very well have been about 2 hours long, so it's good that we're cutting it up like this. I don't mean that in an insult. either. Some of the death omens and things like that are really, really interesting, and I've been really enjoying researching that and getting stuck into that. Unfortunately, we won't get around to doing that episode for quite a while now, as you well know. Well, I suppose I could always record something, even though I know that I'm not going to upload it for months at a time, but I just don't have the discipline for something like that. My brain just won't allow it. So my brain's only like, you know what, you will upload and record everything and edit it all on the same day or not at all. And I don't know what that says about me, but that is literally just how my brain works. So what does the Yan-gant-y-tan really tell us? Don't go for long romantic walks alone in the country. No, I'm not sure. So I think in order to really get at that, we probably have to look at Will-o'-the-Wisp and the other creatures that I mentioned as well. And doing this, I found this really great rhyme associated with Joan the Wad, who was supposed to be, as I said, Queen of the Piskies. So that would make Jacko the Lantern the King of the Piskies. I love that. I love that Cornish connection and Irish connection and connection to loads of different places that was then taken over to America as well, much the same as the American Tommyknockers down mines, which were of course very much influenced by the knockers in Cornwall and the coblynau in Wales. So I love that. I love myths and legends and folk tales sort of travelling to places. That's why I love American Gods so much. I think it's such a cool premise and the absolute best way to kind of celebrate your history, because the whole of American Gods is so American. It's very much like, we are American, this is America. And it's very much inclusive of all these different strands of heritage in America where various different people came from. And I think that that's only a positive way to study it and to celebrate a place, surely, rather than just this one kind of narrative that we're given, which is, as I said earlier, quite often whitewashed. Yeah, American Gods is fantastic and I really, really love it. But I was going to tell you the rhyme, and the rhyme is thus. Jack the Lantern, Joan the Wad, that tickled the maid and made her mad. Light me home, the weather's bad. Like me Cornish accent there. And that rhyme's kind of describing the phenomena of them leading travellers astray on the moors and other kind of rural, isolated landscapes. But as I mentioned before with Yan-gant-y-tan, Joan the Wad is also thought to light the way to people and to help them find their way home. And then there's another rhyme that says, good fortune will nod if you carry upon you Joan the Wad. So there you go. Joan the Wad also helps you out as well. I don't know why she differentiates between certain people. Maybe some people are just like really rude. Maybe they litter on the moors. They're walking around with their pasty on the moors and they just throw the bag away. And then she's like, here, harkety! Bloody disgraceful boy. We bloody better lead him astray. That's how I like to think of it anyway. So again, be polite and courteous to other travellers and to your surroundings when you go for walks. Thank you very much. It will land you in good stead. I'm just thinking about how commonplace the Will-o'-the-Wisp myth really is across England, across European folklore, and probably elsewhere as well. There are lots of different names for various phenomena, Fool's Fire, Friar's Lantern, Hinky Punk, Hobby Lantern, Will-o'-the-Wisp, Willow-Wisp, Ignis Fatuus. Lots of different ways to say the same thing. And I wonder what the actual truth is behind the Will-o'-the-Wisp. And I know that's silly to say, pick out this one over all of the other creatures I talk about. There's got to be a grain of truth, even if it's a tiny, tiny, tiny grain in all of these folk tales. There's loads in America as well. The Spooklight in southwest Missouri, the Will-o'-the-Wisp St. Louis Night in Saskatchewan. Loads of different things in folklore associated in America with it. The Hessdalen light in Norway. There have been scientific explanations, such as natural phenomena like bioluminescence and things like that caused by various things. Then I suppose if you're going to look at it metaphorically as this kind of concept, a light in the dark, and that would maybe explain why there are sinister connotations and why there are also hopeful, pleasant connotations as well, because the light in the dark as a very simple concept could refer to hope or a goal that you are working towards. goal that you need to reach to get there for whatever reason, whether it's your safety or whether it's something that you just need to do. But then on the other hand, you could also say that a light in the dark, by its very nature, illuminates the stuff around it, which is quite spooky and sinister in a way. And also a light in the dark contrasted to the dark kind of shows you that before you've been walking in dark and there's a light over there, so it kind of puts your whole surroundings and your existence at that point in a sinister light. I don't know, it's been a long time since I studied English literature, guys. It's been a long time. Do you hear that bloody ice cream van? It's 4 o'clock. No, it's not. It's 5 o'clock on a windy, rainy British day. What on earth is the bloody ice cream man doing? I'm sorry, I try not to swear very much in my podcasts or get cross, because I obviously want this to be as, accessible to everyone, and not everyone likes outbursts of anger. And I'm not angry at the ice cream man, I'm just disappointed. I don't want ice cream right now, I want pizza. Actually, I might get a pizza because I've been really unhealthy during lockdown. I just don't care. But anyway, the whole light in the dark concept, again, that was probably really pretentious and over the top. I haven't studied English literature or really thought about things like that, or, digging deep into symbolism for a long time, but it just occurred to me that could be a possible way of reading into it. Let me know what you think about that concept. Let me know what you think about Yan-gant-y-tan and what he represents. So thank you everyone for listening. Please do rate and subscribe on any streaming service that you use. It's greatly appreciated and it really helps me out, and then it helps other people listening to my show as well. Also share it around to family and friends. Follow me on Twitter at Celtic Myths Pod, Facebook at Celtic Myths Podcast, and I'm on Patreon as well, Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast. So big thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you to Caitlin, Jay, Sarah, Danielle, Paul, Linz, Laura, Fairy, Folk, Celtic Whispers, A. Lakin, Samantha, Ian, Joanna, Stephanie, Richard, Christian, Dave, Abby, Alexander, KLH, Ed, Anne, Max, K-Man, Ellie Croft, Carol, Brian, Daniel Allenson of the lovely House of Legends podcast, Jay Grover, Siobhan Clark of the lovely Myth, Legend and Lore podcast, Heidi, Aaron, Colin, the Celtic Myths Pod Show, another excellent podcast, Kimberly, River, Keely, Pamela, Lynn, Blythe, Alex, James, Patrick and David. Thanks so much everyone. Happy listening.